Welcome, Booknerds, to another Facebook Live session. And as usual, we feature a book which is doing well on the literary horizon. And we're really excited to welcome, first of all, Shubha Sarma ji to the Facebook Live and the Booknerds podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out.
Thank you for having me over. It's a
Okay.
real pleasure.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about this book and look at it closely because this is what we're going to talk about for the rest of right there. The Awasthis of Aamnagri. And let me tell you, don't be, kind of distracted by the mangoes, although we love them. We all love them, but it's much more than that. And seriously, Shubhaji, we love especially I love the analogy that you created in this book between mangoes and families, and more about that later, of course. But those of you who are not aware about Shubha's work, she belongs to Lucknow and born and brought up there. She is an alumnus of LSR Delhi and JNU, and of course, she is an IAS. So I can't fathom how you are getting time to write between all of that. But her first book was Fly on the Wall and Other Stories. Was it a short stories collection?
Yes, it had 13 short stories.
Wonderful. So I have to go back and read those as well. But super excited about this one. And tell us more. First of all, tell us more about Amnagri. And of course, I am aware about where it is coming from, but about all of those who are watching, for them.
Uh, so readers might have already guessed Amnagri is the quintessential small town or medium town in the Indian heartland of UP or Bihar or Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah.
And yes, for me, it was Lucknow because that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have got back to me, people who've grown up in places like Allahabad or Kanpur or even, Bhopal,
Right.
that it reminds them of their childhood and the town that they grew up in. So I think for me, it's been a learning that though we may have different names for different places,
Yeah.
but there is somewhere a common culture and a commonality which just binds us together, whether it's North India or South India.
That is so true. I mean, we always, everybody boasts about their, hometown. It's like, I don't want to get into that debate. But something that you wrote on page 49 of the book, and it's this chapter, A Ghost is Fond of Eggs. And you say it is because, much like the Amnagri chart, where individual ingredients are mixed to create a unique flavor, several reasons come together to make summers here out of the ordinary. And this, takes me back to my summer visits when I used to go to my Nanihal and, in Mahanagar, Lucknow, and, enjoy those summers, climbing on trees, etc., etc. That whole, experience. Would you like to shed light on that? And, why did you incorporate this particular part? Of course, talking about the chart.
I can't think of my childhood or my growing up years in Lucknow and not think of chart.
Yeah.
Even today, I crave for the kind of chart that used to be there at that time. So I think my writing just brings in a lot of. In this book, this book has been a very a trip down memory lane and capturing a lot of those lost memories. Exactly what you said, climbing trees and visiting your grandparents in
I was
summers.
like with you. I was like with you throughout the book. I was like, okay, this is going to happen. And it was so much of nostalgia. I mean, I could feel it. If I would be able to, although I'm incapable of, I'm just a reader. But, if I would be capable of writing a book like that, I would do it like that. It's so wonderful. And I'm not just, praising you because we are doing this live session, but it's fabulous. I mean, it will associate with a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I'm generally very suspicious of praise, whether on my face, mostly on my face. Behind my back is still,
Yes, yes, totally.
you can still believe it. But if it's on your face, I'm generally very suspicious. But
I'll
I
send
will
you
accept.
screenshots. I'll send you screenshots of these conversations we were having in our WhatsApp group, in the Booknerds WhatsApp group. And I was saying like, okay, you have to read this. You have to. I was like, they must be, thinking the same. I mean, why is he recommending this book? you know.
No, but I completely believe you this time, because you're not the first person who said this to me. And I'm currently posted in Orissa. So people from Orissa have told me that they find it so relatable.
Wow.
I don't know, I never realized that our families were so alike. I always thought mine was a very unique kind of a, namuna kind of a family, where you had all these specimens.
I wouldn't argue with that though.
No, but I think everybody's family seems to have some of those, and people said they found characters relatable, they found situations relatable.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just a very common kind of a existence, and all these people have seen these similar situations.
Right. Let's talk about Pandit Ji. And I really loved him because there, I mean, I have met some people from Lucknow who are really progressive. And in the book also, Pandit Ji is super progressive, and he is in a sort of situation where he needs to, kind of hold back, he can't, express himself. Maybe he was way ahead of his times. So tell us more about him, and of course, what's happening in his life. How is he coping with everything?
When I started writing the book, Panditji was definitely not the hero.
Okay.
He's not hero material.
Yeah.
He's a middle-aged guy.
Yeah.
And I personally, I don't, my heroes are never middle-aged guys of this kind.
Okay.
They're generally youngish.
Okay.
But once I started writing, it happens to me, the character somehow takes over at times. And it happened in this case.
Okay.
And I just managed to put so many layers to him,
Yeah.
because I have seen people like him who are extremely rooted in their culture and who are extremely down to earth,
Yeah.
but at the same time who have this capacity to look beyond their present
Right.
and be so supportive of modern ideas.
Right.
And most of the times I found in my life also that the men folk tend to be sometimes more supportive.
Okay.
And that is what has come out in this book, perhaps.
Yeah, that was quite noticeable. Tell me something. I mean, because going through, I mean, qualifying for UPSC and having a career in the services takes a lot out of you. I mean, a lot of writers, of course, are coming from are IAS also. A lot of them recently as well. So tell me something. How does one kind of find not exactly time, but the inspiration? You can call it inspiration, quite cliched. But why do you have to write? Because you have so much going on. You have like so many problems we can't even imagine in your life, and you're coping with it. It's a tough job, one of the toughest jobs in the world, in fact. So how does one, kind of wade through it?
Uh, yes, I agree. It's a very challenging job. I won't say it is the toughest. I think in today's times, each of us is going through a very, very tough time. So nobody's problems are lesser or more.
Yeah.
We are all literally in the same boat
True.
today.
True.
And because of that, I would not like to place myself anywhere out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And like anybody else, like you, who might be pursuing a full-time profession, let us say Amish Tripathi, who was a software professional
Yeah.
and then he switched over to writing.
Yeah.
So somewhere, especially, I would say a lot of people wonder why is it that IAS officers or civil servants are now writing so much, or were they writing so much?
Yeah.
I think it is also partly because our love for reading or our love for academics or literature,
Yeah.
it is deeply ingrained. That is what has allowed us to persist and continue with academics and maybe qualify for the exam with a bit of luck and God's blessings. But somewhere that love for reading and writing has to be there.
Yeah.
And at some stage, you want to do something apart from your job for relaxation purpose.
True.
So some people paint, some sing, some dance, some maybe just watch the television or travel. In my case, I took to writing early on because it somehow worked for me. I've always written and I found it worked for me. I liked doing it.
So this is
yeah.
When did you kind of start, you realize that you must be reading, and we'll get to that. I mean, which are the books that you love, but When is this? I mean, where? How long back is
So
this?
all my life I have written. I can remember my first essay in class 2 or class 1 or something.
Oh,
I
but,
can still remember. And I think I was very fortunate to be in a school where they encouraged you to write.
okay.
And we had these school magazines where your article came out.
Yeah.
And
Right.
as a kid, you felt very enthused when you saw your name, at the bottom of that article in the school
Yeah.
magazine. And everybody would say, wow, wow, what a nice. So that is where that I think the flame got lit.
Right.
And obviously, in between, when one focused on academics and exams, etc., then this took a back seat.
Right.
But sometime around 2010, I really went back to writing
Okay.
in a very, very what should I say, obsessed manner.
Right.
And that is how the first book of short stories happened. Because I didn't have time to write full-fledged. I wrote short stories in these bursts
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
when I got time.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Avasthis of Aamnagri also a lot of people have told me, and I think they're very smart to have seen through my disguised novella. It's not really a novella. It's these sporadic episodes.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
you can read each story as a standalone, but
True.
if you read them continuously, there is a commonality which takes you.
Yes.
But the whole reason why it's like that is because I get to write only in bursts
Oh,
when I have time or I'm traveling or, I have some free time on hand.
yes.
So I am now attempting to write something more consistent, but it's going to be
Yes,
tough. But
but I mean, it's a different form. I mean, although it was forced upon you, but I can, I could, understand that because it was quite obvious. But that did not deter me from the experience. I mean, I mean, I didn't notice it too much. I mean, let me be honest. And of course, in let's talk about the book. In the chapter, the sari with the temple border, we kind of witness the metamorphosis of Indu, and Indu is a although she is not the hero as such of the story, but quite pivotal. So tell us more about her. I mean, I would say, suffered, but was it suffering? How does she evolve throughout the entire
so
story?
when I started out, actually, Indu was supposed to be the hero.
Okay.
And but somehow I found that this VP type of character, self sacrificing, she was too good to be true.
Oh yes.
So in real life, you don't have, I mean, there may be some one or two
Yeah.
people, but there are not too many of such
Not too.
uh,
Yeah.
too good kind of people.
Yeah.
So in this story, actually, I introduce a side of hers which is not exactly goody goody.
Yeah.
Somebody who's ready to stand up for herself, somebody who's ready to
Yeah.
ask for what she thinks deserves.
Yeah.
And that is actually very important for me because I would like to have characters who are real.
Right.
And Indu in this story actually became a real character for me rather than the original that I had thought of, the VP, wimpy, like my son says, wimpy kid kind of a
Oh
character.
yes. Yes. But I mean, of course, she was too good to be true. But eventually, I mean, I can't give spoilers. But eventually, everything works out. Tell me something. There are so many issues that you have touched upon. I mean, I don't know if deliberately, but kind of organically. The dark bride issue, you have mentioned it in the book, and this is quite prevalent in the northern belt, and it worries so many of us. And even if you go through the matrimonial ads, it's quite common, and we haven't improved even a bit. So yeah, how do we get past this?
I don't think, frankly, there's any getting past it
Okay.
because it's too deeply ingrained, at least till our generation.
Yeah.
I come from a fairly progressive household, but I remember growing up being told I was wheatish complexion. I never really figured out what is this wheatish complexion business, though we had wheat drying in the sun and it had a very goldenish color.
Oh
But
yeah.
I couldn't figure out for a very, very long time what wheatish meant.
Yeah.
And then I realized there were these shade card kind of things, where there were people who were fair and there were people who were
Yes. Yes.
wheatish and people who were dark. So it's literally like the Asian colors shade
Yes.
card.
Yes.
But I think our kids, we don't talk about complexion as much at home. In my household, complexion is not discussed at all. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the same in yours and
Yeah.
most other educated
I've
families now.
seen it all around. I mean, if it's not in the household, it kind of seeps in at a family get together or somewhere, it gets in. I mean, it's too irritating. I mean, I have tried to kind of ignore it all my life, but sometimes you get enraged and you are like, I'm going to hit you, man. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it happens, but I don't think there's any getting away. And by continuously harping on the fact, the dark is beautiful
yeah,
or dark skinned is
yeah,
beautiful, my personal view is that the more you focus on something,
yeah,
even if you're trying to mute it,
right,
it doesn't happen. You're just highlighting it too much. If you just ignore it and keep
true,
moving on,
yeah,
maybe it dies its own natural death. But so I have made a reference to this,
yeah.
and frankly, I don't have any answers because I don't think this is going away. This is just
True.
something we have to accept and
But
live
I
with
think I
and
got
move
my
on.
answer because, even other things like hyper feminism and all these things, if they're left alone, maybe it doesn't, kind of is overbearing. You have used some words in the book as it is. There's so many, like which we encounter, in daily life, and you haven't changed them to English or anything. Were you worried that maybe it deters a certain kind of audience to understand what's going on? Were you worried about that?
That thought did cross my mind because obviously this book then becomes a very niche book,
Right, right,
which to
right.
appreciate the nuances, you have to be, I mean, if not primarily a Hindi speaker, but then at least a working knowledge of Hindi is
Yes,
needed.
yes,
But as I said, this was all nostalgia, and I couldn't bear to do it in any other way.
right.
And I thought, to hell with who can read it or not read it. This is for me. So
On that
I'm going to
count,
write
let's
it.
talk about Niyogi because they are known for taking these risks. They have published so many books like that where nobody believed in them, and then they come out with it. What were the discussions behind the scenes? And we would like to thank, of course, Trisha and everybody at Niyogi for letting us do this. Tell us what were the discussions behind the scenes because that's something we don't get to know.
I think Niyogi is one of the most thoughtful and intellectually stimulating publishers that I have come across.
Okay.
Their interventions or their modifications in the manuscript were, they added so much value to it.
Okay.
And at no point, I don't recall there being any friction between us.
Okay.
Because in my last book, I remember the short stories, there were parts which people wanted to change. And I simply put my foot down and I said, sorry, if this has to go, it has to go like this. I don't care whether it doesn't suit you. But surprisingly, in this book, which had so many more threads, like you're saying, underlying
Yeah.
currents through it, there was no point of friction.
Okay.
So somehow,
Can
I
you be more
don't know, it
specific?
just clicked. And Yogi, I think, is fantastic. As you said, they take so much of risk. They are publishing
Right.
such a diverse genre.
Oh, yes.
And the fact that their strength is in a lot of non-fiction and in a lot of intellectually
Yeah.
stimulating books, that brings a lot of value.
Can you be more specific with the changes that were suggested, or is it just for
In
clarity?
this book, there were hardly any.
Okay.
No, not. I thought I meant my previous book. That is The Fly on the
Oh,
Wall
okay.
and
Okay, okay, okay.
other
Great.
stories.
Yeah. So the part of the book where really I, nearly fell down laughing because, it was so funny. The chapter "A Ghost is Fond of Eggs." It is so quirky. When all relatives, families, and everybody comes together, there is bound to be some, drama. And this was nothing like it. So, where did this come from? And uh, did it really happen? I mean, I don't know.
Uh, the book is a mixture of fact and fiction.
Okay.
So some incidents here and there, not necessarily in my own family, but these interesting incidents are repeated and repeated and repeated, and like Chinese whispers, they get um, spicier and spicier with every repetition.
Yeah.
So yes, a part of it, the drinking the eggs part or the eggs thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to put spoilers either,
Oh
but
yes,
that part is true. But then the whole weaving the story around it is definitely fiction.
true. I mean, what are your aspirations exactly with writing? Because a lot of writers are coming in, then they fizzle out. But I'm sure that you are passionate about it. But there must be some ambition, because, uh, and the follow-up question to that would be, what are the books that you read if you get time at all? But do you have any plan as such, or it's going to be, you write, take it as it comes, and go ahead.
I take it as it comes.
Okay,
I don't have a goal as
okay,
far as my writing is concerned,
okay,
but I would like to write
okay.
more than I
Yeah.
am able to.
Yeah.
So let's see how it comes out.
I think, I mean, if we look at our very own Mr. Ruskin-Bond, he's still, kind of so prolific. So you have a lot of time, trust me, to, kind of come up with more and more books and, regale us with the wonderful, I mean, the words that you have used, sometimes they, kind of, they look forced. I mean, it's like, why are you, plaguing us with this, terrorist vocabulary? But in this book, it was quite organic. And do you think about all of that at all, or it's just,
Yes, I
flowing?
do think a lot about that,
Okay,
and I am a little careful on in trying to use different words,
okay, okay,
because sometimes if you read the same word continuously,
yeah,
it jars in
yes,
some place. Sometimes it doesn't.
yeah,
So I've tried to make it a little interesting and bring in words, and I think that's where my first the person who first edited the manuscript
yeah,
really helped,
okay,
because wherever I had used some heavy words which they felt were not
okay,
fitting in,
right,
they suggested that I replace them,
okay.
and that has, I think, really improved the quality of the writing.
Well, let's talk about the Haveli. We haven't talked about the Haveli, and it's a character in the book, I would say. I mean,
Yes.
more than the main characters, the protagonist even. And we haven't talked about Shakuntala. I mean, can I talk about them interchangeably? Because I felt that Shakuntala was Haveli and Haveli was Shakuntala at various times during the novel. Tell us more about that, please.
The Haveli is definitely a central character.
Yeah,
The original title of the book, when I started writing my manuscripts, when I save them, I give it a name. So
yeah.
the name was Panditji's Haveli.
Okay,
And when I sent the manuscript to different publishers, I also offered that as one of the titles for the book.
okay.
And the Awasthis of Aamnagri came in much later because
Yeah,
I thought it brought out the humor aspect very well.
right. Yeah,
There was
true.
something quirky about the title, and it kind of gelled with
Yeah,
the.
yeah, yeah, it does. I don't think so. I would have loved any other title, to be honest. This is fine.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so the Haveli is definitely a living, breathing character. And I just wish I had been a little more patient and maybe added a couple of more chapters. But I was not getting enough time to write, and I wanted to see this book out somehow. So, I would have added a couple of more chapters, which would have brought the Haveli to life
So may
a
I
little
suggest
more.
something? May I suggest
Please
something?
do.
You can add those two chapters and release them online for
Ha
everyone.
ha
Why
ha.
not?
Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, Niyogi won't be happy about it, but I think that would work. And let's talk about the small towns. I mean, there is so much migration, and it's especially for Uttarakhand. We are based in Doon, and we have kind of suffered because of it. I mean, of course, right now there is reverse migration, but usually it is migration, and the entire social fabric has kind of collapsed, I should say. There are so many ghost villages. I'm sure you must be aware about them. And the joint family has kind of become extinct. What are we missing here?
Again, it is an irreversible change which none of us can do much about.
Yeah,
We might lament, we might be nostalgic, we might miss it,
yeah,
but you can't bring the joint family back to life the way it was.
yeah.
But at the same time, and I mentioned this earlier, is that I noticed that the joint family coming back in a different way,
Okay,
wherein you have your independent houses and kitchens, but you are living within maybe shouting distance
Right.
of each other, maybe in the same apartment block or in the same
Right.
colony or something. So
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
coming back because
Yeah.
we are seeing some value in that.
Yeah.
As for small towns, I love small towns. I think the kind of character that they bring to individuals and human beings,
Yeah.
where you knew everybody.
Oh
You
yeah.
could go to a movie hall with bunking classes because you never knew
Oh yeah.
kiski chachi ka, bhai ka, somebody would catch you and then the news would come back home.
Yeah.
So
You can
I
meet your own
love
parents sometimes. It could be.
no parents. So chalo, phir bhi you can your timing can be managed in
That's
a
because
manner.
that has happened to my mom. That's why.
Okay, but towns like metros like Delhi or Mumbai or Calcutta, you are just lost. uh, so I love small towns. I'm so happy that a lot of small town stories are coming out, whether in
Yeah.
my book or whether on the screen or somewhere,
Yeah.
because somewhere small town has a character which a metro does not.
Yeah.
It has life and
Yeah. Okay. In one chapter, you have mentioned the CFD, and it's it sounds like a chemical formula, but it is not. It's a collection of residents, I would say, and that entire chapter, took the genre of this book kind of sideways and in a good way, because I enjoy children books and that quirky flavor a lot. So tell us more about that writing choice and why did you make that?
okay. So I'll let you in on a little secret which I haven't shared till now.
Yeah.
Panditji's Haveli started with two chapters.
Acha.
The sari with the temple border,
Yes.
wherein all the characters come in,
Right.
and the CFD.
Yes.
And these were two chapters, that is all. And for many years they were just lying in my laptop as
Oh,
two
okay.
chapters.
Yeah.
And then I kind of built things this side, that side.
Yeah.
So in some ways the CFD is a chapter which is not like any other.
True. True.
It is a very different, as you've noticed, it's a very different chapter. The characters come to life in a very different way.
Yeah.
So that is partly also because it was written as a standalone chapter, as a short story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, that is the reason, but I thoroughly enjoyed writing it. And
Oh
I
yes, I that's my favorite chapter by the way. It's
Okay.
my favorite because I don't know. I have two kids and I enjoy those kind of stories. So maybe because of
Yeah.
that, let's. And my final question, of course, about the courtroom drama, and of course Pandit ji, and they are advocates, and there were so many advocates. There are so many advocates going around in Amnagri, or whatever you call it. So it is the kind of what was happening even now or back then. Um, Tell me something. Why kind of weave it into the plot? Did you want to really do it? It seemed like that.
It came in naturally a little bit because I have a lot of advocates in my family.
Acha, okay.
If I had not cleared the civil services, I would have ended up as a lawyer, for all I
Okay.
know. So, and I found the idea very intriguing to build it in somehow, that, because in a family of lawyers, or even let's say in a family of doctors, or in my case, in a family of civil servants,
Yeah.
whenever you talk on any issue,
Right.
you look at it in a very, very strange perspective of
Yeah.
your profession.
Okay.
So I'm sure if a family of doctors is sitting around and talking about mangoes, they'll be talking about the health benefits, or
True. True.
about the nutritional value or something. And if it's a family of businessmen, they'll be talking about the prices or the seasonal fluctuations or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just because you're eating, breathing that profession every day.
Right.
There are some professions which are like that.
Yeah.
So I just thought that if a family of advocates was to do anything, they would do a courtroom drama at home, because
Yes.
it's just their life.
Oh, it was. I loved it. I mean, the other. I mean, I was astonished by it because what is happening, but it was quite something. So yeah, I mean, of course, we have to ask. We are the book nerds, and we have to ask, what are your favorite books, recent or maybe before, whatever you have read. Do you get time to read? First of all, that must be a challenge in itself. But tell us about your favorite books.
I have a lot of favorite books.
Oh, good.
So
Top
I
three
don't
then.
know where to start.
Top
No,
three.
there's no top three. It depends on which day you ask me and what comes to my head.
Oh, yes.
So
True.
since you mentioned you have young children and you like kids' books, for you, I would say my all-time favorite would be the Harry Potter series.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I what I find most remarkable, and which I have tried to emulate sometimes in my writing, is that even when you're talking about issues in a very simple manner,
Yeah.
you can talk about very complex issues
Right.
and leave it to the reader.
Yeah.
uh, in fact, one of the questions I have had in the past is that your book is a very simple book.
Yeah.
It's only about family ties and family lives.
Really?
So my response was that it's a book where the reader can choose to go to
Ah,
what depth the reader
true,
wants to.
true, true, true.
And I think the Harry Potter series brings the same element to for me, that it's
Mm.
how deep do you want to
Yes.
understand and go into a thing.
And that's wonderful. I suppose, I mean, you don't have to be, I mean, if I'm not in a mood to kind of, delve deeper, I will have fun on this
Absolutely,
Harry.
absolutely. Have a good laugh and with your cup of tea and just enjoy it.
I don't have to be one of those, snobbish readers who go online and kind of discuss it in detail. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
you can just read
But
it.
if you do want to get into detail, then yes, it's your
That's
choice.
true. Yeah.
And then a similar series books which I really like. I love short stories of O. Henry
Yeah. Yeah.
or Saki,
Yes.
and Somerset Maugham, Roald Dahl, all time
Oh,
favorite.
yes. Yes. Yes.
His
True.
short stories are amazing. So these are and in Hindi, Prem Chand, I literally worship the altar of
Yeah.
Prem Chand,
Yeah.
because again, very simple language,
True.
very simple themes,
Yeah.
but he can bring out the best and the worst of society for
Right.
you in a three-page story,
Right.
which I assume, I mean, I think there's no other author for me who compares to him.
Yeah, I agree with you because in popular culture, I mean, especially for millennials, they don't talk about all this. I mean, because there is too much of the West kind of there in our ears, so we are lost somewhere. But if somebody reads Premchand in detail, I mean, you're right. I mean, there's no one better perhaps in
It's
across
also
the book.
something to do with what you have lived through. I mean, the millennials have not seen the description. I mean, what Premchand describes, the dusty villages or
Yeah,
untouchability or stuff like that. They haven't seen it. So you can't really blame them. They're not able to connect with it.
right, right.
But yes, I think another good option would be in Hindi. I am just trying to think apart from Premchand. Feluda stories of Satyajit Ray.
Right,
They are great. They have that element of thrill and twist in the end.
right,
Something like the Jeffrey Archer,
right.
but our
Some,
own Indianized Feluda.
something
So
contemporary that you might have loved in like recently yeah.
Jeffrey Archer, good old Jeffrey Archer.
Okay,
Uh,
great.
and I think Harry Potter is contemporary enough.
Oh yes, of course. But you have to read more because there's so much coming out. Of course, you don't get time, but you have to read more and come back on the podcast. Of course, we'll do another live session for another book of yours. And thank you so much for sparing time. It was wonderful. And whenever you are in Doon or on the way to Missouri, please stop by. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's
And
been a
guys,
real pleasure.
of course, you have to go buy the book, leave an Amazon review. You may contact. I noticed that you are very active on Twitter, so you go on Twitter and what do they do on Twitter? I, they just
No,
DM.
I will put a link of this podcast on Twitter now.
Oh, yes. So you can go there and kind of talk to ma'am and of course leave that review, Amazon review. It helps the author a lot. It helps everyone a lot. And if you don't want to buy it from Amazon, just walk into a bookstore. Ma'am, where is it available in? Uh,
It's available in several places. I'll share the details with you.
Great, great, great. Yeah, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you. This book is one of a kind, and that's what my verdict was and what I felt, to be honest. And yeah, guys, if you want to check out other book related content, you can always go to our Facebook and Instagram platforms and check them out. And looking forward to another podcast. Thank you so much, Shubhaji. It was
Thank you. Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Right.